Dave Wellman. I posit that the main entertainment value found in Monty Python and likely other films of cult status isn't so much the film itself, but rather sharing the experience with other fans. That's absolutely correct. Quotes, memes, and the like. I conclude that this isn't a question per se, but a thinly veiled excuse for the comment section to start lobbing Python quotes at each other. It's a remarkable coincidence, Dave, because when I said that I didn't particularly like Spaceballs, the comment section here just immediately erupted in Spaceball references and lines and jokes and so on. What you said is really profound, and I don't think I've ever realized it quite so clearly as you put it. That's exactly what it is. A cult film is something that is so offbeat, it draws a certain kind of person. And when a bunch of those people get together, it's fun. Star Trek, for example, appealed to a certain kind of person, somebody relatively bright, somebody who's interested in things like the future and technology and so on, and just somebody who's just wanting a little more out of life here. But Star Trek had no great appeal for guys who were football players or any of that stuff. So basically a geek magnet, and still is. Likewise with some of these cult comedies. I'm sure there were many, many people who went to see them once and were utterly mystified about what the whole thing is about, and simply just couldn't believe it. But I saw 2001: A Space Odyssey, this back before VHS. I saw it in theaters. It was the midnight movie in Coral Gables, Florida. I bet I saw it 11 times, something like that. And there's got to be something a little wrong with you, to want to see a movie that slow 11 times. And the reason I wanted to see it 11 times was it was so bloody realistic. It was just like being there. It was like being in space. And I used to draw the docking rings and stuff with little, those little square things that you have at school, where everything's square, or little circles are bigger and bigger and bigger. I used to draw these docking cones long before the things ever existed in the real world. And so I did that. Now, as it turns out, just out of sheer luck of the timing of it, I got to be a Rocky Horror Picture Show fan right at the peak, which is when, this would be about 79, I want to say, somewhere in there, 79, 80. And the reason that was a great time to do it was because people had just started doing what made that show unusual, but it was ripening and then ripe. But I saw it one time when it was overripe, and that was terrible. So basically what happens is this. You got a very campy story that no one's taking seriously anyway. And Rocky Horror is unique in this respect as far as I know. And people in the audience would go in there, and they'd start reacting to the movie. A great example would be at the beginning. It's a 20th Century Fox film, so it's dun 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 dun, and the searchlights are sweeping the sky, da 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 da. And while those things are happening, the people in the audience have brought flashlights with them, and everybody in the theater is shining flashlights around on the roof to match what's going on the screen. A couple gets married right in the very, very beginning of the film. Susan Sarandon and Barry Bostwick, I think. And as soon as the marriage ceremony's over, they go out to the car, and people in the audience start throwing rice. And it's fun. And I like the show. I like the movie very much, and I like the soundtrack very, very much. Eric Blake says again, it's like, let's do the Time Warp again. The Time Warp is just a great song, and we would do that everywhere. Not so much in parties because that'd be a little weird, but like for instance, my first year in college or second year in college, the Florida Gator Band played Time Warp all the time, and it was a clever show. It really was. It was a very clever show, and a disturbing show in the same way that the West Hollywood thing is disturbing, but also interesting in the same way. So this audience participation part of it was just a lot of fun. And I was there right at the peak of it, right when the people who had been doing this had really perfected almost all of the jokes. Just about every single activity that you could do in that movie was just about in place when I got there, and I got to see some new ones come in, but by and large it was there. I did it a couple, I don't know, 3-4 months or something, every other weekend, something like that. And then what happened was people got bored with this, and they started basically just saying the lines. They would just say the lines while the actors were saying the lines. I saw that once. I just said, this is horrible. This is just terrible. There's nothing interesting about that. Yeah. Bone Canoe 86, Tommy, I can't pronounce that guy's name, Wissos, he made a movie called The Room, maybe the worst movie ever made. It's certainly the worst acting ever done. And those are fun too, because that allows you to have the communal sense of tearing up a gazelle or something. You get to watch something that's just so appallingly awful that you can just sit around with your friends and laugh about it and just talk about how unbearably awful it is. But that communal aspect of it is what worked. And Star Wars has that quality. Star Trek has it to some degree, but not in anything like the quantity that Star Wars does, or the intensity. You go to a Star Wars movie opening, and everybody's dressed as Jedi Knights. There's 7,000 people in a theater, and 6,992 of them have lightsabers. And Star Wars is old enough now so that, like me, 10 years later, they have memories of watching Star Wars as kids. I have memories of watching Star Trek as a kid, and that colors them and stays with them basically for their whole lives. So this is the power of entertainment. It becomes the mythology. There are thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, and perhaps even millions of people in America and around the world whose religion is they're a Jedi. That's what they are. That's their religion. Klingon is a language, and it was so. At first, it was just kind of just grunt or something, and then they started working out the language. You put a bunch of smart people on something, and then things happen. And so it became a complete language, and it's taught in colleges. And there are people that can talk to each other in Klingon, know exactly what they're saying. And it's not just making sounds, it's an actual language. That's really interesting to me and cool. And again, I hate to keep coming back to it, but that's what I like so much about this game, is that there's so much intellect and talent there, and there's so many possibilities. It is a blank slate of almost 2 million players, and that's a fairly big number, 2 million players. And it's going to get much bigger as the game actually comes out and starts working and so on. And you got 2 million individual units running around essentially randomly, and how do you organize them in such a way? Because you have no coercive power over them. You're not holding their paycheck or anything. How do you convince people to be part of your organization? How do you do it? We were looking at another organization today that got a little attention, called the Matadors, and they are they said they're a piracy and security conglomerate. And they said, I have to get the exact quote. I'm sorry. I just have to, because if I screw this up, I'm going to screw up my reply. I have to get it. Excuse me one moment. I know this is the typical kind of horrors that we have come to expect from our beloved Stratosphere Lounge show, but I just genuinely need to see what that sentence was. I was reading their organization's kind of background page, like our website is a. You go to aurorarepublic.space, and you will get a pretty clear idea of the kind of people that that we are. There's lots and lots and lots of small government in there, and we are basically just saying, hey, we're tired of being run by emperors and stuff. Do you want to keep what you make, and do you want to have a piece of land that's yours? And there you go. Basically, that's it. But this one piracy concern called the Matador, and they wrote in their mission statement that piracy is another word for liberty. And I read this just a couple hours ago. Piracy is another word for liberty, and I just read that and I just went off. It's like, piracy is what I wrote is piracy is another name for theft, rape, and murder, the swine. And so, you've got people out there that are going to be playing the very negative parts of human behavior. People who can say something like that piracy is the ultimate liberty. It's just unbridled stealing and murder. That's all there is to it. It's a violation of basically the two rules. Don't hurt anybody and don't take their stuff. Do what you say you're going to do. They don't do any of it. We're kind of these, Boy Scouts, I would say. That's certainly the way I set it up, and I think Matt and Foghorn's a veteran. He loves his country. Matt's kind of a well-known degenerate, I guess is probably the best way to put it. But he loves his country too, and Matt and Foghorn both understand this country and what it is and can be and should be, and we're trying to get that down and influence people who we've never met, and try to convince them that there is a better way to live than saying things like piracy is liberty. Because it's not. Piracy is murder. Even if it's virtual characters or avatars or whatever you want to call them, you're still making the same moral choice. Consequences aren't so big, but you're still making the same moral choice. I choose to steal these people's stuff and kill them, as opposed to the rest of us who basically choose to find a decent place to live and be around people that we generally agree with, help each other when we have to. When we have to, we mean called from within, and get together to defend the place. And that's pretty much what we do. We won't take anybody who's a member of those organizations. We don't like them. And I saw these matadors, and I just said, I'm looking forward to just killing every last one of these pirate bastards. So we're kind of the good guys out there, I guess. We're probably the goodest of the good. Paladin types, I guess, have always appealed to me, and I think a lot of people too. They just want to be good people and they want to do the right thing, and this gives us a chance to show what it looks like.